You think about crime groups, some pop up, cause trouble, then vanish. But then you hear about the Philadelphia crime family. We're talking active for over a century.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering. Founded way back, what, around 1911? Salvatore Sabella?
Exactly, over 100 years. And they've weathered, serious internal wars, constant heat from law enforcement.
Hmm.
And they're still seen as a significant force. That kind of resilience, it really makes you wonder what their secret sauce is?
It really is remarkable, especially when you think about everything they faced. Leadership changes, incredible violence, REO laws specifically designed to take down outfits like this.
Right, REO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. That was supposed to be the hammer.
It was, and it hit them hard at times. But they persisted. It just shows how deep these roots can go and how tough it is to completely dismantle these kinds of networks once they're established.
Definitely. So, okay, for this deep dive, we're going to try and unpack that long, often brutal history. We're relying on the sources we've gathered. They've certainly got a reputation, right? Violence, a revolving door of bosses.
Oh, absolutely. Notoriety is putting it mildly sometimes.
So our goal here is to really zero in on the key moments, the big players, the major shifts that shaped this family. We want to give you a clearer picture of their impact and, how they've managed to stick around for so long without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail. So just to map it out a bit, we'll start at the beginning, the founding years in South Philly.
Okay.
Then look at times when things were, let's say, less chaotic. Then dive into those really intense power struggles.
Which seemed pretty frequent for them.
They really do. And finally, bring it up to date, look at where they stand now and what that tells us about organized crime today.
Sounds good. Let's jump in. So South Philadelphia around 1911, Salvatore Sabella. What were those early days like? What were they actually doing?
Well, it's pretty much the classic early mob playbook. Sabella and his guys, they were deep into bootlegging once Prohibition hit. That was the gold rush era for organized crime.
Huge money there.
Massive. And alongside that, you had the bread and butter stuff. Extortion, loan sharking, lending cash at sky-high rates, illegal gambling. That was the foundation. Power and profit.
And it seems like the big players, New York, Chicago, they started noticing pretty quickly, especially with Prohibition booming. It wasn't just a local Philly thing for long.
No, getting recognition from those larger syndicates was really crucial. It gave them legitimacy, connections, maybe access to better booze suppliers, wider networks.
Like getting inducted into the bigger league.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It likely helped them navigate disputes with other groups too, provided a framework.
Okay, so Sabella runs things for a couple of decades, then steps down in late 31, and bam, things ignite. The first Philadelphia Mafia war kicks off.
Right, between John Avina and Giuseppe Dovi, fighting over who takes over after Sabella.
A 5-year war. What usually lights the fuse for these kinds of internal conflicts? Is it just ambition?
Ambition is a huge part of it, definitely. When a longtime boss leaves, you get a power vacuum. People see their chance. Plus, maybe different ideas about where the family should go. In this case, Avina and Dovi both clearly wanted the top spot.
And Avina ends up getting murdered in 36.
Yeah, which paved the way for Dovi to take control.
And Dovi, he wasn't just content with South Philly, was he? He looked beyond.
No, he really expanded their footprint, pushed into Atlantic City, parts of South Jersey, and crucially, he strengthened those connections with the Chicago outfit and the big New York families, Genovese, Gambino.
So, building bridges, expanding territory, what were their main income streams under Dovi? Still the same stuff.
Pretty much, yeah, but likely scaled up. Sources point to narcotics becoming more significant alongside the perennials. Illegal gambling, loan sharking, extortion. He was consolidating their position, making them a bigger player.
Those connections to Chicago and New York must have been vital for that expansion.
Absolutely. Sharing resources, maybe criminal techniques, intelligence, and having those lines of communication helped manage friction with other powerful groups. It's all about managing the underworld ecosystem in a way.
Okay, fast forward to the 1940s. Giuseppe Joseph Ida takes the reins. But the story here is that the Philly family seemed really heavily influenced by the Genovese family from New York during his time, almost like a branch office.
Yeah, that's often how it's described. The Genovese were, and are, a powerhouse. Bigger resources, wider networks, maybe just more political clout within the mafia structure. It's common for larger families to exert influence over smaller ones. Philadelphia hadn't quite reached that independent heavyweight status yet.
But that changed, didn't it? 1956, that seems like a key date. Philadelphia gets a seat at the big table. the commission, along with Detroit.
Exactly. That was a huge deal.
So what is the commission, for people who might not know, and why was getting on it so important for Philly?
The commission was basically the Mafia's national board of directors, leaders of the most powerful families, mostly from New York and Chicago initially. They set policy, mediated major disputes between families, approved new bosses, stuff like that.
It's the governing body.
Right. Getting added meant Philadelphia was officially recognized as its own independent family, not just a faction under New York's thumb. They got a vote, a voice in national mafia affairs. It was a major step up in status and autonomy.
But Ida's leadership wasn't smooth sailing either. He gets caught up in that Appalachian meeting in '57, the big mob summit that got raided by police.
Ah, yes, Appalachian, a legendary screw-up for the mob.
He actually fled to Sicily after that raid, right? Leaving Antonio Polina in charge as acting boss. Talk about chaos.
Yeah, Appalachian was a PR disaster, exposed the whole network. Ida fleeing just highlighted the pressure they were under and, like you said, created sudden instability at the top in Philadelphia.
Which leads us to 1959 and the arrival of Angelo Bruno, appointed by the commission itself. This guy's a major figure.
Huge figure, often called the first Philly boss with real clout on the commission. And his close relationship with Carlo Gambino, the Gambino boss, really cemented his power.
And he had this incredibly long reign, 21 years, known for relative peace. They called him the Gentle Dawn. How did he manage that stability after all the earlier turmoil?
Well, Bruno seemed to prioritize, business over bullets, at least internally. He was more about negotiation, keeping things quiet, maximizing profits without drawing too much heat. Those ties to Gambino probably helped fend off external challenges, too.
Sounds like a more corporate approach, almost. Expanding profits, especially with Atlantic City starting to develop, but preferring talk over violence within the family.
Exactly. Less internal fighting means smoother operations, more money coming in, less attention from the cops. Focusing on lower-risk crimes, keeping a lid on internal beefs. It likely made the family more prosperous overall during his time.
But he famously drew a line at narcotics trafficking, right? He
Yeah.
banned it, supposedly feeling the long prison sentences.
It was the official line, yeah.
Yet, some of his top guys, Philip Testa, Antonio Caponegro, they were secretly involved anyway. That feels like asking for trouble down the line.
It absolutely was. Bruno probably saw the huge risks long sentences under tough new drug laws could cripple the family. But the profits were just too tempting for some. That internal division, that hypocrisy almost, it definitely planted seeds for future conflict. Ambition versus caution.
And they were involved in other complex dynamics too, like controlling rackets in Philly's African-American communities and even striking a deal, a street tax with the rising black mafia. What does that tell us?
It shows how established groups try to maintain control, even when new players emerge. The street tax was basically the Bruno family saying, okay, you operate here, but you pay us for the privilege. It's acknowledging the black mafia's power while still trying to profit from it and assert dominance, a pragmatic, if exploitative, arrangement.
Then you had the Atlantic City factor. The casinos were starting to boom, and the New York families wanted in. Bruno wasn't keen on sharing.
No, he saw Atlantic City as Philly's territory. But the immense profits were like blood in the water. New York, with its power, felt entitled to a piece. Bruno's resistance there definitely created friction with very powerful people.
And that friction boils over dramatically. His own consigliere, his advisor, Antonio Caponegro,
Atomic bananas, yeah.
he plots with the Genovese boss, Frank Thierry, to kill Bruno. The supposed reason was to open up drug trafficking, but it sounds like Thierry played him.
It looks that way. Terry apparently wanted Caponegro's own lucrative operations in North Jersey and a bigger slice of Atlantic City for himself. He allegedly sanctioned the hit, then turned on Caponegro afterwards.
A brutal betrayal right from the inner circle. Is that common, heading your own boss?
It's the ultimate breach of Mafia code. While loyalty is preached, history shows that ambition, greed, and manipulation can lead to betrayals at the very top. It happens. But killing a boss without commission approval, that's a death sentence, usually. Thierry's alleged manipulation shows the ruthless calculations involved.
So Bruno is murdered, March 1980. Shotgun blast outside his home. The Gentle Dawn era ends violently, and the peace shatters.
Completely. It kicks off decades of instability and bloodshed. His successor, Philip the Chicken Man, Testa.
He didn't even last a year, did he?
Nope. Killed by a nail bomb planted on his porch in March 1981. Orchestrated by Frank Narducci Sr., another guy eyeing the throne. Just brutal Public violence.
A nail bomb. That sends a terrifying message, but it must also bring down incredible heat from law enforcement.
Oh, absolutely. Spectacular violence like that guarantees intense police and FBI attention. It might intimidate rivals short term, but it disrupts everything and puts the whole organization under a microscope. Fear spreads through the ranks, too.
So after Testa, you get this power struggle. Peter Casella versus Nicodemo Scarfo, Little Nicky.
Right, and Scarfo had connections again with the Genovese family, particularly their consigliere Lumana. That helped him. Narducci, who killed Testa, ended up getting murdered himself. Casella was pushed out, banished. Scarfo takes over.
But not peacefully. This leads to the Second Philadelphia Mafia War, another bloody period, 1980 to 84 roughly.
Yeah, Scarfo was consolidating power, and he did it ruthlessly, wiping out anyone perceived as a threat or disloyal. His alliance with the Genovese gave him backing, but it probably didn't sit well with some of the Philly old guard.
And Scarfo's style was the polar opposite of Bruno's, wasn't it? He was based mostly in Atlantic City, milking the casino boom.
Very different. And unlike Bruno, Scarfo allowed New York families to operate in AC, reportedly in exchange for their support of his leadership.
That's a big shift. Trading territory for backing. What does that say about his priorities?
It suggests his main goal was absolute personal power within the Philly family. He was willing to make concessions externally to solidify his internal control. Pragmatic in a brutal sort of way.
He also enforced a strict street tax. Everyone involved in crime had to pay tribute.
Everyone. Bookies, drug dealers, loan sharks.
Mm.
You operated in Philly or South Jersey, you paid Scarfo.
And we saw that, or else guys like John Calabrese, Frankie Flowers, Delfonso, they refused or fell out of favor and they ended up dead.
Exactly. The street tax wasn't a suggestion. It was enforced with extreme violence. It was pure extortion on a grand scale, asserting his total dominance over all criminal activity.
And under Scarfo, the family got heavily into methamphetamine trafficking. That became a big thing for them.
Yeah, meth was huge in the area, and they reportedly controlled a lot of the P2P supply, the precursor chemicals. Big money, but also big risks.
He even had the Greek mob boss, Chelses Bourras, killed for refusing the street tax, even though they'd worked together before. Ruthless doesn't quite cover it.
No, that murder really highlighted Scarfo's approach. No alliances were sacred if they challenged his authority or his income stream. It showed everyone he wouldn't hesitate, no matter the history.
He sounds like he ruled by fear. Paranoid, demanding total loyalty.
Oh.
The murder rate linked to organized crime just soared in the 80s under him.
Absolutely. You had guys like Nicholas Caramondi who later flipped, describing Scarfo as ordering hits casually, wanting them done publicly sometimes, just to send a message. It created this terrifying atmosphere.
Yeah, an environment where nobody felt safe.
Exactly. Constant fear, suspicion. Even loyal guys had to be wondering if they'd be next if they made one wrong step. That kind of paranoia eats away at an organization.
And then came the murder of Salvatore Testa, Philip Testa's son. Killed, allegedly, on Scarfo's orders because he broke off an engagement with a mob-connected woman.
That was the story, yeah. Killed by his own underboss, Salvatore Merlino Sr., with Scarfo's okay.
Killing the son of the previous boss, your own underboss's son, over that. That must have shocked even hardened mobsters.
It was seen as incredibly egregious, violating traditional norms, family ties. It demonstrated Scarfo's volatility and brutality in a way that really alienated people, even within his inner circle. Deep distrust started to set in after that.
Seems inevitable, and it all came crashing down, didn't it? November 1988, Scarfo and a load of his top guys convicted on massive racketeering charges.
Yep. Long prison sentences. And key to that was the testimony from insiders who flipped. Guys like Tommy Del Giorno and Nicholas Nicky Crow Caramondi.
So his own reign of terror basically created the witnesses who took him down.
In large part, yes. The intense violence and paranoia made people desperate to save themselves when the feds closed in. RICO plus informants, that was the combination that finally dismantled Scarfo regime.
Okay, so Scarfo's gone, locked up for life, but the vacuum doesn't last long. John Stampa is appointed boss around 1991. Sicilian-born, reportedly backed by New York again.
Right, but the younger generation of Philly-born guys, led by Joey Merlino Salvatore Sr.'s son, they resented an outsider taking charge.
And cue the Third Philadelphia Mafia War, early to mid-90s. Stanfa faction versus the Merlino faction, it just never seems to end.
It really was a cycle. This time it was partly about local pride, the Philly guys versus the Sicilian outsider backed by New York. A new generation wanting their shot at the top.
Stanfa did something unusual too, didn't he? Recruiting guys who weren't fully Italian, like the Visi brothers. That breaks traditional mafia rules.
Big time. Traditionally, you had to be full-blooded Italian, on your father's side at least, to be a made man. Stamfa bringing in guys like the Veezees suggests maybe he was desperate for loyal soldiers during the war, or maybe the old rules were already eroding under the pressure.
But Stanfa didn't last either. The FBI got him on tape, right? Recordings from bugs in his lawyer's office, even his doctor's office.
Yeah, pretty invasive surveillance. Those recordings, along with testimony, were key. He and his main guys were arrested in '94.
And then John Veazey, one of those controversial recruits, he flipped and became a government witness.
He did. Tragically, his brother William was murdered the day John was supposed to testify. A brutal message about the price of cooperation.
Horrific. But Veazey's testimony still helped put Stanfa away.
Yes, Stanfa was convicted, got life in prison around '95, '96. The tapes and the insider testimony sealed his fate.
So Stanfa's gone. Joey Merlino gets out of prison in '94, right in the middle of all this. He steps up, but puts Ralph Natal out front as the official boss.
That was the setup, yeah. Natal was the older figurehead, the public face. But everyone knew Merlino and his younger crew were really running the show. Merlino was the power.
And Merlino cultivated this really flashy image. The press called him the John Gotti of Passyunk Avenue. Very different from the old school guys.
Totally different. Loved the attention, the cameras, very much a celebrity gangster persona. It was a stark contrast to the low-key style of Bruno or even the sheer menace of Scarfo. He seemed to enjoy the spotlight.
But his crew was still ruthless. Reports of them guzzling from bookies, basically, running up huge gambling debts and then refusing to pay.
Yeah, that kind of thing doesn't exactly build trust or respect in the underworld. It's aggressive, shows power, but it also creates enemies and instability.
Yeah.
Seen as disrespecting the unwritten rules.
And the street tax issue comes up again. Conflict with a group called the 10th and Oregon Crew, led by Louis Tura, ended violently.
Yes, disputes over territory and tribute payments. Tura ended up dead. It showed Merlino was willing to use force to maintain control, just like his predecessors.
Then comes another massive shocker. Ralph Natal, the front boss, gets arrested and flips in 1999. The first sitting boss to become a government informant.
Unprecedented. Natal apparently felt Merlino had cut him out, wasn't giving him his due share.
Right.
So he turned. It sent absolute shockwaves through the entire American mafia, not just Philly.
I can only imagine. A boss cooperating? That must have been devastating.
Devastating. It shattered the code of omerta, silence at the highest level, gave the feds incredible insight and leverage against Merlino and his crew.
So Merlino and his top guys go on trial, 1999 to 2001. Natale testifies against them.
Right. Merlino gets convicted on racketeering charges, receives a 14-year sentence. Though, importantly, the jury didn't convict him on the murder charges Natal laid out.
Still, a big hit, taking the boss off the streets for over a decade.
A major blow, absolutely. It decapitated the leadership again and created another power vacuum, or at least an opportunity for someone else to step in as acting boss.
And that someone was Joseph Legambi. He steps in as acting boss while Merlino is inside and holds things down for a long time, 99 to 2014.
Yeah, Uncle Joe Legambi. He seemed to represent a return to a more traditional low-key style. Less violence, more focus on stable moneymakers.
Trying to calm things down after the chaos of Scarfo and the early Merlino years. Mending fences with New York.
That seems to have been the approach. Stabilize the family, avoid high-profile violence that attracts federal attention, focus on reliable rackets. Rebuilding relationships would also have been key to avoiding external conflicts.
And what were those reliable rackets under Legambi?
Reports suggest a strong focus on things like video poker machines in bars and clubs, illegal sports betting, loan sharking. Less flashy than Scarfo's meth empire, maybe, but steady earners.
The bread and butter stuff again.
Pretty much lower risk, consistent income.
Okay.
Keeps the wheels turning without too many fireworks.
Then Merlino gets out in 2011, claims he's retired, moves down to Florida mostly, but pops back up to Philly sometimes. Did anyone really believe he was retired?
Skepticism was high, let's put it that way. Many law enforcement experts and mob watchers firmly believed he was still calling the shots from behind the scenes, even from Florida. It's hard for guys like that to completely walk away.
Especially with Legambi facing his own legal troubles around that time. He was indicted in 2011.
Right. Legambi and several others were indicted on racketeering charges. Big case. But it ended surprisingly.
He beat the charges.
Ultimately, yes.
Yeah.
After a couple of trials and hung juries on some counts, Legambi was acquitted in 2014. A big win for him, and it allowed him to theoretically step back from the acting boss role with Merlino out.
But the family just kept going, despite these constant indictments and trials. It's incredibly resilient.
It really is. It points to how ingrained these structures can become, how leadership transitions happen, even under immense pressure. There's always someone ready to step up or step back in.
And they keep adapting their businesses, too. More recently, reports link them to the construction and home rehab industry in Philly.
Yeah, that's another classic area. Construction involves big cash flows, opportunities for shaking down contractors, influencing unions, laundering money. It's always been attractive to organized crime.
Merlino couldn't stay completely out of trouble, though. Convicted again in 2018 for illegal gambling.
Right, a relatively minor charge compared to his past, but it showed he was still involved in illicit activities. Led to a short prison stint.
And the feds kept coming. November 2020, another big racketeering indictment hits. Reputed underboss Stephen Mazzone, a Captain Dominic Grande, others.
Same old charges mostly. Gambling, loan sharking, extortion, some drug stuff.
Here.
It showed law enforcement pressure was relentless. Mazzone got 5 years in late 2022.
So the cycle just continues. Arrests, convictions, new guys step up.
That's been the pattern for decades. Disruption, adaptation, persistence.
But then came something truly bizarre, right? August 2024. Reports surfaced that Merlino was demoted, maybe even shelved or excommunicated for podcasting.
Yeah, it sounds like something out of a movie. Apparently, the leadership wasn't happy with him having a public profile, doing a podcast, giving out sports betting tips. Too much attention.
Podcasting gets you kicked out of the Mafia. That's wild. What does that tell us?
It's fascinating, isn't it? It shows this massive clash between the old world mafia code of absolute secrecy omerta and the modern world of social media, podcasts, constant public exposure. His high profile was seen as a liability, a violation of fundamental rules.
And George Borghese was reportedly named the new boss in his place.
That's the current reporting, yes. Borghese, a longtime figure often at odds with Merlino in the past, apparently takes the reins.
So even with all the chaos, they still maintain a formal structure.
Hmm.
Borghese as boss, Mazzone technically underboss, but in prison, so Michael Ancelotti is acting underboss. Ligambi back as consigliere, with Anthony Stano acting while he keeps a low profile. Dominic Grande as a captain.
Right, that formal structure persists. It provides order, hierarchy, a chain of command, even if the people in the slots change or are incapacitated. It's part of what allows the organization to endure through leadership changes and incarcerations.
Okay, so looking back at this whole century-plus saga, what's the main takeaway? After all the wars, the betrayals, the Archico cases, they're still here.
I think the key takeaway is that incredible, almost stubborn resilience. They've adapted, survived leadership decapitations, internal warfare, intense law enforcement focus. Their power might be less than it once was, sure, but they've endured in a way few criminal organizations have.
Yeah, that longevity is just startling.
It really speaks to how deeply embedded organized crime became in Philadelphia and the sheer difficulty of rooting it out completely.
And that recent Merlino podcasting demotion, it's such a stark illustration of the tension, isn't it? The old ways versus the new world. Secret societies struggling with an age of total information.
Absolutely. How does a clandestine organization that relies on secrecy and operates outside the law function when its leaders might be tempted by or accidentally stumble into public notoriety via modern media? That Merlino situation suggests it's a major point of conflict internally.
Right. Which leaves us with a pretty big question thinking about the future. Given this cycle of violence and renewal, the constant pressure, but also their knack for survival, what happens next for the Philadelphia Mafia?
Exactly. Will they just fade away eventually as the old ways become totally incompatible with the 21st century? Or will they find new rackets, new methods, maybe become something different, less visible, but still influential?
It makes you wonder if they'll adapt again, or if this time the pressures both internal and external might finally be too much. Definitely something to ponder.